The crisis at the top of Iranian power has entered an explosive phase. And this Thursday, April 23, 2026, Iran is what stands out most. Split between the faction trying to ease the pressure and the military faction which wants to keep Hormuz under confrontation. The central axis is clear. On one side, President Masoud Pezeshkian advocates using diplomacy to reduce tension with Washington. On the other side, the Revolutionary Guard continues to impose the logic of force on navigation, on negotiations, and on the regime's own message. That's why the dispute is no longer just external. Now it's also an internal war for command, for direction, and for political survival within Tehran. I'll tell you all about that in a moment, but right now you'll want to be subscribed to the channel to stay well informed. Real-time information in the best quality. Journalistic quality you've ever seen, with the trust of Milson Alves, Global. The most visible point of this clash appeared in the Strait of Hormuz. On April 17th, Chancellor Abbas Araghchi announced that the passage was open for commercial vessels during the truce, which caused an immediate reaction in the market and hope for some relief. But the opening was already surrounded by control because a high-ranking Iranian official told Reuters that any crossing needed to be coordinated with the Revolutionary Guard. In practice, this meant that diplomacy spoke of an opening, but the key remained in the hands of the armed wing. Not even the shipping companies fully bought into the narrative. Several ships tried to cross and ended up turning back, faced with doubts about mines, safety, and real freedom of passage. Less than a day later, the hardliners rushed to override the diplomatic signals. A report from the Critical Threats Project stated that on April 18th, the Revolutionary Guard Navy attacked commercial vessels. It declared that ships of any type or nationality should not approach the strait and, in practice, reversed the previous announcement by the foreign minister. The center's assessment indicates that this move was not only pressure against the United States, but also an internal show of strength to make it clear who is in charge in Timor Muis and who sets the tone for negotiations. That's when the tension becomes real. It's not just a confrontation between Iran and the United States, but a dispute within the regime itself over who can speak, who can negotiate, and who can pull the political trigger. This rift became even more evident when Pezeshkian on April 20th declared that every rational and diplomatic path should be used to reduce tensions with Washington. This sentence, and each one individually, would already be important, but it takes on another dimension when you look at the context. During the same period, the Guard maintained effective control over transit through the strait and over the pace of the crisis. While the president was trying to sell a less destructive solution, the military machine kept operating as a brake, as a threat, and as a sign of veto. In other words, what we see today in Tehran is civilian power talking about détente, and armed power showing that the final word still belongs to them. On the outside, the pressure from the United States only increased. Starting April 13, Washington began blocking incoming and outgoing traffic at Iranian ports, a measure that directly hits the financial heart of the regime. Reuters reported that this pressure could remove nearly 2 million barrels per day of Iranian oil from the market. On April 23, Reuters itself reported that the American military had already ordered more than 30 ships to return or change course, and that at least 3 Iranian oil tankers were intercepted in Asian waters, far from the Gulf, in an attempt to strangle Tehran's trade, without relying solely on the Hormuz hotline. This helps explain why the crisis has become so acute. Washington is not just threatening, it's testing the regime's economic limits on several fronts at the same time. This shows two things. First, that oil is still the lifeblood of Iran's finances. Second, that keeping Hormuz under intimidation and blockade doesn't just hurt its adversaries, it hurts Iran itself, which sees its main revenue route become a bottleneck. That's where the line defended by Pezeshkian gains political meaning. With the economy wounded, infrastructure under pressure, and exports stalled, insisting only on confrontation stops being a show of strength and starts to look like self-sabotage. And the most embarrassing thing for Tehran is that even partners who used to serve as a diplomatic shield have started to push for the reopening of the strait. On April 13, China, through Wang Yi, said that a blockade in Hormuz goes against the interests of the international community. Then, on April 20, Xi Jinping stated in a conversation with Mohammed bin Salman that normal passage through the Strait serves the common interest of the nations in the region and the international community. Beijing's message was direct, even if in diplomatic language. The crisis has already gone too far, and global trade, energy, and regional stability weigh more than Tehran's show of resistance. When China presses this point, the Iranian regime loses ground even with those who depend on the region's oil. Moscow also followed the line of containment. Reports about the conversation between Sergei Lavrov and Abbas Araghchi indicated that Russia advocated for maintaining the truce and continuing the talks, while the Iranian side reaffirmed its willingness to guarantee unimpeded passage for Russian ships in Hormuz. The gesture is revealing. Russia does not want to see the maritime corridor get out of control because that would increase the cost of the crisis, heighten instability, and complicate energy and strategic interests. In other words, neither China nor Russia bought into the idea of letting the Strait become a permanent showcase for the most radical wing of the Revolutionary Guard. Both prefer predictability, normal passage, and negotiation. This further isolates the Iranian factions that are trying to turn Hormuz into a total weapon. That's why the narrative of absolute strength is starting to crumble. When the president talks about diplomacy, when the foreign minister announces openness, when the Guard imposes military coordination and then tightens up again, what the world sees is not solid command. What the world sees is confusion at the heart of the regime. And this scenario gets even worse when Washington starts demanding a unified response from the Iranian leadership. The White House made it clear on April 22nd that Donald Trump wants a unified stance from Tehran to end the hostilities. To put it simply, the United States itself already sees that Iran does not speak with a single voice. And when the opponent notices this, the pressure increases even more. In this scenario, the fight between the Iranian president and the Revolutionary Guard stops being a backstage detail and becomes the center of the crisis. The Critical Threats Project report was straightforward in saying that the Guard consolidated influence not only over the military response but also over Iran's negotiating position. This explains why every gesture of openness is followed by a block, a warning shot, or a new impossible condition. The hard fact right now is that Hormuz has become a mirror of the Iranian crisis. The Strait opens and closes as if it were following the dispute inside Tehran. When diplomacy tries to breathe, the alarmed faction tightens its grip. When the alarmed faction tightens its grip, the economy screams. When the economy screams, China and Russia demand predictability. And when all of this happens at the same time, the United States sees weakness, not strength. That's when the siege becomes more suffocating because external pressure increases precisely when internal unity shrinks. Like the video, subscribe, and check the comments at the end to get even more engaged with the Milson Alves global community.